So I was asked by a fellow YouTuber to try to explain how dihedral works. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of good explanations out there on YouTube on how a dihedral works, so that has led to some misunderstandings about how it really does work. So I'm going to try to explain how it really does work. So, well, as you may or may not know, dihedral is if you're looking at aircraft, say directly onward, and this is the nose of the aircraft, and you have your pilot and co-pilot. Uh, the wings are tilted slightly upward on each side, and is this tilt, which is known as dihedral. Now, this has a positive effect and a negative effect. The negative effect is that the lift vector on each wing becomes slightly tilted, which means the lift vector, which is directed upward, is slightly smaller. I've exaggerated the angles here for the purposes of explanation. So the lift vector is slightly decreased because it's been tilted, or that is the vector that is directed upward, which is opposite to the weight, has decreased. So you get a little bit of lift inefficiency on each wing. But the positive effect is that if you get a gust of wind which will tilt the aircraft, say, in this direction, the aircraft will have a tendency to want to right itself back into a little bit more of a level condition. Now, before I explain how it works, I'm going to explain how it doesn't work, or rather what the mistaken ideas on how it works. And the mistaken idea on how it works is as follows. Because you have dihedral, when one wing tilts, when the airplane rolls, say in this counterclockwise fashion, one wing will become more level while the other wing becomes more tilted. So the wing that is level will now have its velocity vector acting directly upward, whereas the wing that is more tilted, its velocity vector will be even more horizontal than it was before. And of course, the component of lift for this wing will decrease even further, whereas the component of lift on this wing will increase to be nearly perfect. So it's the mistaken belief that the efficiency on this wing increases, the efficiency on this wing decreases, and therefore that causes a rolling moment. This is not true because we know that rolling moments are a function of only two things. One, the magnitude of the force, and its perpendicular distance to the center of gravity of the object, in this case the aircraft. So since this perpendicular distance to the center of gravity for this wing has not changed, and its magnitude has not changed, its torque or rolling moment, which is counterclockwise in this case, has not changed. Similarly for this aircraft, its distance perpendicular to the force vector has not changed, and its magnitude has not changed, so its rolling moment, which in this case is clockwise, has not changed. So the net torque on the aircraft is still zero, just as it was when the aircraft was more level. So this is the mistaken belief that because this wing is less efficient and this wing is more efficient, that it rights the plane. The wing efficiencies may change in terms of the horizontal component, but the torque they create about the aircraft has not changed. So there's nothing to allow the airplane to tilt back into a more level condition. So the way it really does work is when the aircraft is tilted, what this does is it causes the total lift vector to tilt as well, which creates a sideways force on the aircraft. Yes, it's a sideways force on the aircraft that is now created. And so the aircraft will now slip in this direction. Now this will happen whether you have dihedral or not, but it's this slipping movement that allows the dihedral to work if it is there. If the dihedral is there, you'll always get the slip whether you have dihedral or not. But in this case, the slip will have a positive effect on the aircraft if you have dihedral. So if the aircraft is slipping in this direction, that means you'll have a component of wind which is in the opposite direction, this way. And what that'll create is it'll create a greater angle of attack on this wing than it is on this wing. Now, you'll see here that when I originally drew my original drawing, I drew this so that you could see a little bit of the underside of each wing. All aircraft fly slightly pitched upward, and we call this angle of attack. And this angle of attack allows the air to strike the underside of the wings, and this impact strike, in addition to Bernoulli's equation on the upper side of the wing, creates the total lift vector on the wing. And for any child who's ever stuck his hand out the window of a car, and if you have your hand edge on like this, you can keep your hand there fairly well. But as you tilt your hand this way, the air will impact the palm of your hand, and that will tend not only move your hand backwards, but also move your hand upwards. And so if you've ever done that as a child, you know that when the air impacts the underside of a flat plate, whether it be your hand or a wing, it will create an upward lift force. The best way to understand why the underside of this wing appears greater than this wing when you have dihedral, and therefore increasing the lift vector on this, is you just take a book, and I've made my little book here. Take a book and just turn it sideways like this, and open up the pages of the book so that it forms a V shape similar to the way I've drawn my aircraft. Now, if you were to look at the book directly edge on, then the angle of attack on each wing is identical. Now, if you were to tilt the book slightly upward so that it has some small angle of attack, you'll be able to see a little bit of the underside of each wing, and this is what creates the lift force which allows the plane to fly. Now, if the airplane were to tilt this way, for instance, as I have drawn here, we'll get some side slipping in this direction, and that will cause some wind in this direction. So from the wind's point of view, the aircraft will now look like this. And that, as you can see, the underside of the downturned wing, this wing, has more plane form area directed at the wind than the upturned wing. And because of that, that will create a greater lift force on this wing, and thus righting the airplane. So it is not the change in wing efficiency that causes the dihedral to right the aircraft, but rather the increase in the lift vector on this side and a decrease in the lift vector on this side due to the fact that the side slip angle has changed on each wing, and creating a greater angle of attack on the dipped wing than on the upper wing. And this is how dihedral really works. And it's a little bit hard to understand unless you use a three-dimensional prop like I did here with the book. So I hope that explains how dihedral works to the majority of people out there. And I hope that eliminates this mistaken belief that it's the change in wing efficiency, because just changing the wing efficiency does not change the rolling moment. And what you really have to do is you must increase the lift on one wing, which will go from here to here, and decrease the lift on the other wing, which will go from here to here. And that will change the rolling moment and allow the aircraft to right itself. So that's the end of my amateurish video, but I hope it succeeded in the objective of explaining how dihedral works. Thanks for listening.